Really, really special guest. I've been waiting for this for a long time. Chuck Curran has agreed to come and talk to us a little bit about 120 South Main Street. He's just an awesome guy, and I know you're going to enjoy this. So, thank you, Chuck.
Well, thank you. Can everybody hear? Okay. Great, great, great. Well, as Bonnie said, my name is Chuck Curran. I'll give you a little bit because everybody always tries to connect. Okay, who was his parents? My parents were Jim and Rose Curran. My dad was born on a farm north of Hurstville. And my mother was a Lambert, born in Green Island, and then grew up in a house south of the fire station, which is no longer there. I have 4 siblings. Jeannie is my oldest. Unfortunately, she's passed away. She married Mick Head. Then Pat Shekel. So when you go to Bellevue, you see all that construction equipment. That's my family. My brother Bob lives in Denver, and my little sister lives in Nashville, Tennessee. So that is our family. I spent most of my life in corporate America. I started, interestingly enough, and it's interesting to talk, you know, I see Thelma and I see Roger here to talk about 120 South Main is like talking about the enemy bank. So growing up for so long at Maquoketa State Bank, you never went in that bank. You have an opportunity to see the keys once in a while through the door, so it's interesting to talk today about the bank. I started at Maquoketa State Bank in 1978 when I was a senior in high school through a work-study program called Distributed Education. The club was DECA. My first boss was Lois Moore. Super great egg. Just kids from all over lived on Pershing Road, east side of town. I worked for different people like Linda Jairus and Gary Dennis and there's other folks. When I graduated from high school, the bank offered me a full-time job. Nobody in my family had gone to college. In fact, my dad hadn't even graduated high school. Moved through the process, but I thought, wow, I'm going to be the next president of the bank. So I'll give you a quick, smart, funny. One of the companies. Little did I know you needed a college education. You're familiar with GE? They're the largest refinery. So spent years at Principal Financial Group. Then spent more years at Wells Fargo Home Mortgage. About 25 years in corporate America altogether. Unbeknownst came back, Al Tubbs asked me to come back in 2014 to get involved in the community, and I did that. And so their whole project was, how do you develop a couple years using AI, using all the technologies. Unfortunately, in February of 2019, these kids, 3 kids, came up with an idea that they would have a wearable. That took a little longer to get a smartwatch, and we had hoped to have a smartwatch because I'm not smart enough, but so a smartwatch, some kind of wearable device, funny enough, that a roofer would wear, and it would measure, talk a little bit about different biometrics from that he would have been a sophomore when I was a surrounding. So here's I had no clue who Robert was. You know, I've told people when you're a roofer, you're busy, you're going down the road. Also, you know, girls, you had no time for sophomore boys' names. So, Don, were you in that class, or where were you? Okay, no. So just kind of a funny thing. So we're here to talk about 120 South Main. It'll work. It's interesting. There's a power line. But I want to talk about it also alerts your form in Maquoketa. So both of you know. So there were 4 banks in Maquoketa at the time. The other thing it measures is if you hydrate or not so many times. That was founded in 1865. There was a Jackson County Bank, Safety which is the predecessor of the Jackson State Work. Well, it measured, hey, you need to take a break. It's hot. The Exchange Bank. So the stuff then, the Citizens Bank. We did do summer science camps this year. Only Jackson. So my wife and I have a daughter. She participates in summer camps and all that. Has that changed? So we had 50 kids. They were delightful, but the whole Jackson State I had no at the time. I was working with 3 teachers, and they said, you know, well, what's your interesting tidbit? So this is a name that is, if they act up, I'm calling your grandma. So WM, and then you're going to be in big trouble. You know, was listed as a president for Jackson County Bank in 1906. But we'll do that again. We had 50 kids. It's because many of you may have just gone to see the new Airbnb. By Josh and Brielle Wright. In summer, we'll do that again. And then the last thing we do is a high school start. He built, so think of Shark as the mayor of Maquoketa. So the show where you didn't build it done.
This actually addresses all the stuff before the
And then
presentation.
did
So
Stevens
it's all
move
the
in
work
after
around
that?
identifying the
Okay.
market,
And
identifying
thank you,
competitors.
this is gonna be good,
all
and I
that
can
kind
bring
of
a
stuff
pen,
around.
so I'm gonna have to
Uh,
ask you.
The
Interesting
winner
enough, that house,
last year was a
1965, where
young
the Oster
man,
House,
Isaac
Isaac
McCoker,
McCoker, that was the home that they lived in for a while.
His idea was
down the street.
to develop a technology
So the actual
from a
building,
drone that
you
was
guys
the
all see the
unique
building,
sound
the
signature
nameplate on the
of
building
invasive
says
species
1920.
that would
That
affect
was
soil.
actually grand opening April 21st of 19, or April 28th.
But, you know, so different, so the whole idea
Every
is,
woman who
then you don't spray the whole nation,
every man
you
got
spray
his
this
car.
portion.
Because
It
this
talks
is
about
where
there
the
was a room
right in the
and
front
so
door
it
where,
makes sense for the
you know,
environment,
banking
but
was
then it also
exhausting
makes
for
sense for
women
the
to
producer
go and rest.
because they can, you know, get their feet up and have some social
Okay,
elements.
so the last thing I want to share, fun story. The bank was actually designed by a company called Little
Now, all
Company.
of
They
us,
were in
since we're older,
Sioux
remember what a safe deposit box is,
That's
right?
LYDL.
Safety
Interestingly
stuff.
enough, the
And
Little Company
remember,
built
you got a little thing like this,
25
regardless of what
in the
bank you were in,
and
there's
20s
keys in here,
in
there's a
Iowa
key for,
and in South
the
Dakota.
bank had a
So they're
key,
very
and
well
you
known
individually
as a
had a
designer of
Both
banks.
had to
Now,
be used to turn
This bank,
So
when
the
the
first
bank
national bank
closed,
building
there were about
was
1,500
totally
boxes
from
all
all
in
the
the
other
bank.
banks that they built.
And they had 90 days
in
in
the post
architectural
office
magazines at the time.
notify
It was every
every
owner of the box on record.
by
So
certified
most
mail
of
that,
the
hey, the
banks
bank's closing, come in, get your
Are
card.
long and narrow, so
Boxes
not more than
ended up in
22
three
feet
different
wide.
categories.
Very
First
narrow, on a
was, and
corner
the largest, found the owner, they had the key, the terracotta was used as adornments, so you would see it on top of columns. The second was, they found window wells, you might see it as a roof line. Might see as a roof line. He is, you know,
Closest
so
little bank, if
to
you're
drill
interested
lines,
in
it's
opening
like
an architecture, is in Grand
the
Mountain.
bank covered all
So the
those
first
costs.
trust and savings
So
bank in
the
Grand
appointment
Mountain, and it is
was that
became
the description of what a little bank
The third
usually has.
category,
Now there's a drive
and that was added to one side.
interesting
But when you look at
was
the original bank, it is a long, narrow bank.
now it's a little
And that's
different.
kind of what
So,
Little
and I'll
was
just
known
use
for.
a name that
I don't have any idea.
So Matt,
If, I don't have any idea why this bank was designed the way it was, but it was listed on the box to be a showcase. Interesting tidbit, in 1921, the American Tile Company out of Chicago. And so what happens, there were about 25 boxes that they couldn't find anybody, you know, no idea who it was.
Interestingly
enough,
so the bank has to have both of those or all those drilled open. They take an inventory with 2 bank employees there. Everything is put in a tamper-resistant, replaced and recreated. Everything is inventory, even a paper clip is inventory. It then is sent to
Now, let me ask you a
Minneapolis
quick
because that's
question.
where US
Does
Bank is
anybody
headquartered.
here, you know, I talked about that when I talked about closing myself. Anybody
And after
after
a year
is
is
then
then
sent
sent
to
to the
the
state
building?
and it becomes
Oh, really?
part of the
And
great
what's your
Iowa
name?
treasure hunt.
Joanne Sagers cabin.
So,
Joanne Sager's
Of the
cabin.
boxes-
So which bank did you work for, Joanne?
no one
Jackson
claimed.
State.
Okay, and you, one of them, just like this.
You started in
One of the large
1954.
boxes
Oh,
when they opened.
so you probably remember,
filled
we got
with
together a
silver
small
coins.
group, Mary Kay Flinker was one of them, because I think she started in 1957. Somebody's grandma after high school graduation.
So I
What
would
did you
encourage
do?
you to go out to
I
the
sorted
state, just
checks
look,
by
Great Treasure Hunt,
hand
Iowa, you
in
get the
alphabetical
website,
order.
you type in a name,
By
you can
hand.
find out
And did you work on the
somebody,
first floor, or did you work
that's
upstairs?
related to you, could have had that box.
Well, that's
Now,
interesting. Well, then,
interestingly enough,
anything between you
what
and God,
happens,
should
they
get
keep
everything
everything
right
in the
today.
box,
So
just give it 5 years, just, yeah.
After 5
So,
years, they
after the
monetize
depression,
anything.
so anything that's worth
a
any
group
money
of
they sell.
farmers
And they throw everything else away, unfortunately. Which I asked the person to not talk to the Iowa Historical because there couldn't be stuff in there. Well, no, gotta go.
So they
the
looked at,
other
in Zwingle, had a bank, had a
this
charter in Zwingle. And in that box, and again, this is an unclaimed company owner, it could or nationally, to run was a loaded pistol. They moved the charter from
When you think of today with all the crazy gun stuff going on, that doesn't sound as odd. And then you think somebody snuck a loaded pistol
right?
somewhere on the person in the First National Bank building. So went to the bank and trust company, put it in the box, and then went in and locked it away. Now, Marilyn Williams is convinced that savings bank has hidden in it, but it's an interesting story, and I don't think anybody or Macoka Bank and Trust Company. I did ask the bank, can you just give me the names, because I'll bet money that people know. If I just listed the 25 names, someone would say, oh, that's my aunt.
So Jackson
of course,
County
for
Bank
confidentiality reasons,
was in
which makes total sense. So, but I would encourage you to go out, take a look at the pharmacy, see if you've got some cash. It's almost at the 5 years where they will monetize. And I don't know if it's the 5 years from when the bank, or 5 years when they actually received it, but it's getting close, and I would encourage you to go out and take a look.
Correct me on that, but.
Anything you want to add, any questions? That's all for
kind
my,
of, history there.
presentation
If
today. I
you
appreciate
look
you
at
being
the,
so attentive, and it was interesting to talk again about a bank that I never worked
Along
in.
the east side, on the
But anything
second
anybody else
floor
would
of
like
the
to
windows,
add?
there's actually
Any
a
memories you
tin
have of
box
the bank that you'd like to
that
share?
contained the original burglar
No,
alarm.
there's
That still
some of the
sits
older
there.
ladies
Burglar alarm's not in there,
that we
but
work
at least the
with
tin box is
have been
there.
dead for years.
So, and I am told
Sokol.
that there is some lettering of the original
remember
Jackson
Louise
County Bank
and,
upstairs
The Christmas parties.
in some of the spaces that
Whoever
later
the
became
young girl
attorneys'
was that
offices.
sat
I
by
think
Louis,
Birthright was there.
he always
The
takes
J.C.'s
her
had an office there.
place.
So interesting. Let me explain a
Just
little
being
bit
friendly.
about Jackson.
Yes, just being
That's
friendly.
the story that went around.
Oh, my Lord.
They were a bank at the turn of the century.
Well, it's funny because Mary Kay, you must have worked in the same department Mary Kay did, because she remembers going to work
the
for
Jackson
Marguerite
County
Sokol.
Savings.
Her memories are that she was a very sharp dresser, but no nonsense. We're gonna get the stuff done and throw it back to us. So. Anything else? Oh, yeah, Roger. Oh, I'm sorry.
Which means
Roger, go ahead.
by the state. Now, interestingly enough, Jackson State Bank had their
Louis
own
Lee
liquidity
and,
issues. So
Johnny
you can
Jarvis
see,
to,
in 1921,
they're
the
both
state
short
banking
of
examiners
They were
closed
like,
the Jackson State Savings Bank because it was insolvent.
and
It was considered overloaned at the
the
time.
office was
And interestingly enough, a fund
they were almost
so of Jackson County Bank, so at that time it was a Brazilian
We went
bank,
through
so it was a Springfield
kind
bank,
of
a Miles Bank, a Preston,
holding in that little
a German bank, and
break
Preston, and all kinds of banks.
area.
They got together and came up with capital and
They were
infused that
The
capital
bank.
into Jackson State Bank, where you were able to open up in a week. But you kind of wonder if that was their lesson, and so they were maybe, very conservative, because again, that was the only bank that opened.
Just one quick thing, then we'll go around.
So that's where
the bank,
those names come with all white change, and I may refer to Jackson County Bank, the Jackson Teller State Savings Bank, and then Lancaster Stations had
It was
Green
Jackson
Marble.
State Bank and
We
Trust.
actually have some of that green marble at the bank.
So, interestingly enough,
Our
amazing
Bob
names that you know,
Stockton's warehouse and basement.
maybe
was
was
Lynn
lived by them.
Punch.
So
Lynn G.
somebody who had
interestingly
ripped
enough,
that out.
Roger,
It was just all stacked up in the basement, and we went and we made some tables out.
I talked to Al Tubbs, and it's interesting to talk to Al. Probably refer to someone as Old Man Fuller. But he was the dad. He was a banker in Des Moines. He worked for a bank in Des Moines that his dad owned. I couldn't find any information about that. At some point, interesting. Yeah.
So
And
Louis
they
Lane
purchased
wrote
the
a
controlling
really legal
interest
book
of Jackson
under the
State
name of, it's got a book cover.
Savings Bank, and if anybody has
All
to
kinds
see
of
me afterwards,
stories
I'd
about
love to jot
Jackson
those
State
down.
Bank. and
The Fuller
different
family
stories.
also opened a
People
Dubuque
that
Bank in
lived that worked there.
1935. And that was Dubuque
Really
Bank and Trust Company. That'll become important here in a minute. In 1948, Lynn G.
I had one other little thing I just remembered.
as his son,
My dad's cousin,
Lynn
Milt
S., who
Singer,
is referred to
worked for
as
the bank.
Bill,
He was
come to
officer
Makota
or
and run the
something.
bank.
And
so
there
he
were
did
5
that.
of us
So,
kids who lived in the country.
Bill,
we
Lynn S.
didn't have
became
much
president
money,
of the
and Dad
Jackson
would
State
go in
Bank.
every fall.
Some other
borrow
things interestingly were happening at the same time too, so history has a way of
to
repeating
get us
itself,
through the
right?
winter.
So in 1958, a group of farmers and business people said, you know what, Makota is growing too
I'm
fast to
a
just
late
be
member of
served.
Makota in 1985, but
That was led by Dr. Marvin
You may
Dowchow.
remember him. He and
Some of
his
you
wife
may
moved to
remember, I used to
Fairfield,
do the
5
papers. Oh, Dowchow's on the
after
Emma Court.
left.
He
And they're
was
now
a
in Kansas
dentist,
City.
he was a
That's where their daughter
conservationist.
lives.
He
and
led the
grandkids.
effort
And
to start a
They had the 3
new bank.
boys too, and the one who went
1958, and it was
died of
called
brain cancer.
the
But they
Makota
all,
State
at one time, all 3 of their sons
Interestingly,
worked
that
for
bank
out in Silicon
was
Valley.
located
for
on
the
East
different
Platte Street
companies out
in a
there.
building that is still there today.
went to Fairfield.
So today it's the Sedona Staffing Building. You may, if you look close, see a little of the
So
black
for all
marble.
grandparents
If
here
you look
in the
around the
venue,
corner, there's a nice
so
deposit
how
box
do
there
all of
for
our
the Vision
really
Bank.
young
Now,
grandchildren
many of you may
find their way
remember
into these
Dick
programs?
Sorensen. So
Great
American
question.
Family Insurance.
So Bonnie was asking about how do you get
For years also sold monuments. So what I'll do is I'll make sure when we roll those out, I'll provide you information. Because it's interesting, in 61, then MSB, because my grandma moves from that East Platte Street part of the office that they're at today. So I thank you for asking that, but I'll make sure that, just as for the UX design.
I talked about Old Man
Forward being those we usually start in February, March, but we also, for putting together negotiation around schools, a moratorium on teachers, and, you know, they, oh, that's a really good idea, well, they need a little, very well-known banks are appreciating that progressive things. Anything else? Oh, Roger, yeah. Does anybody remember the Fullers? Roger, do you remember?
Story about your son,
Mana? Yeah.
owner of the lockbox,
Oh,
who
and
wanted
did,
to rob the bank, would simply
The
go
old
in,
man Fuller?
I
or
remember the gun.
Okay, and which were your family friends? I would agree, and were they friends with Bill? Except Marilyn thinks it's where they hit the bird. They did. So, okay, well, thank you very much.
Kind of across from the Fourth Ward School.
Oh, interesting. Any, Roger or Mana, anything you remember?
Well, I just remember old man Fuller being very stately, kind of tall. He looked the part.
Ah. Well, interesting, then a lot of the banking landscape changed a bit. So Lynn S. runs Bill till 64, till a guy named Peter Bazanzin came to town. You may remember he ran More America, or Morris Plan, I think it started out, and then converted to More America. They bought Jackson State Savings Bank around 1964. Also in the early 60s, the Jackson State Bank purchased the building that is north of the bank. So now I'm not going to ask how many of you frequented Harry Hogger's bar. But Harry Hogger had a bar next door called the Sportsman's Tap. And in the early 60s, that was purchased by the bank. I couldn't find any information about when indeed they took it over, although I do have some pictures from the early 80s that shows that Alinger Insurance was one of the first folks upstairs there. And then you may remember the Makota Foundation was upstairs. The bank provided them space. In 66 then, 2 Jackson State Savings Bank lenders, John Fagerland and Ed Tubbs, by controlling interest in the Makota State Bank. Now it's interesting, Al talks about that his dad, Ed, and John had a number of discussions. Is it Del Pooler? Is it Del was his first name? So I had a number of discussions with Del Pooler about their interest of buying a bank. They had a number of discussions. The bank was never for sale. In 1966, all of a sudden, Del calls John, says the bank's for sale, and there we go. Now here's an interesting thing. You know, kind of a small knit industry. So when John and Ed needed the money to buy the bank, they went to their old boss, Bill Fuller, who was now at Dubuque Bank and Trust Company, to borrow the money to purchase the Makota State Bank. They sought counsel with old man Fuller, about, hey, is this smart? Should we do this? And Al said he was tremendously supportive and encouraged them. Just an interesting tidbit. So in addition to the formal agreement of, you're going to pay this loan back and there was an informal agreement, a handshake agreement between the Fullers and Ed and John, in that Maquoketa State Bank would never grow into Dubuque markets, and BB&T would never grow into Maquoketa State Bank markets. And that's still honored today, even though everybody who made that handshake has passed away. So, you see Fidelity Bank here, you see Dutrac here, but you won't see a BB&T office. Just like, interesting enough, there's an Onward Bank in Cascade, and obviously here in Maquoketa, but you won't see that moving to Asbury or any of the Dubuque suburbs because of that. So, just kind of a weird agreement. Does anybody remember the jingle from Jackson State Bank? Okay, the right answer would have been said yes, because since no one said yes, then I'm going to have to sing it to you. So this is from the 70s-ish. It went, we are the wide awake bank, making it all so easy. Good things happen with your money at the Jackson State Bank. It's easy. We are the wide awake. So that was the jingle. Now it's interesting, that jingle's on a reel-to-reel at KMAQ, and they had no ability, they couldn't tape it over anyway. Craig Bentrott felt that Beth Jacobson was responsible for that jingle. Many of you may remember Beth. She was an executive secretary. She went on to do marketing for the bank, and then she actually went on to be executive director of the Maquoketa Chamber of Commerce. And her daughter, I think, lives here, and she was back a little while ago and toured the bank, and that was kind of fun to talk about. So in 1982, right-ish, when the bank was being sold to Hawkeye, Jackson State Savings Bank hit an employment high of about 75 employees. Now the thing to remember with that is that was employees downtown in the main bank, at the Motor Bank, which was on 2nd and Platt Street, on the West Platt Street office, which was across from Noby's at the time, if you remember back that far, and then the offices in Bernard and Delmer. So lots of offices, lots of employees. Now, unfortunately, and this is Craig Bentrott sharing and talking, one of Hawkeye's measurements of efficiency and profitability were how many millions of dollars were under asset per employee. And at the time, about 82-ish, before the farm crisis, both the Maquoketa State Bank and Jackson State Savings Bank were about 75, 78 million-ish. So when you divide that out, 75 million by 75 employees is only 1 million per employee. And Craig Bentrott said we were at the bottom of every list that they would publish with Hawkeye Bank, and they just knew it was not going to be good. They knew that there was going to be, unfortunately, cuts and downsizing, and that kind of created, obviously some efficiencies there. Now, I don't know, does anybody remember Paul Dunlap? So he was the CEO of Hawkeye Bank Corporation. He was a frequent visitor with Hawkeye Bank to go here. So, little quiz. I'm going to give you the first couple because it's so long ago, none of you were there then. So I talked about W.M. Stevens was president of the Jackson State Savings Bank in 1906. And then a guy, also a familiar name, right? J.E. Squires. He was president of First National Bank till 1911. He passed away in 1911. So J.E. Squires is the guy. He was a dry goods merchant, very successful merchant in Maquoketa. He built Squires Manor. Now, is that right, Don? Okay, thank you. He built Squires Manor, and so Squires Manor, obviously, Robert Abbott purchased that. and it's turning into an Airbnb. I did want to make one quick comment though, because I got a lot of questions on this. So there was recently a sale at Schuler's on stuff from Squires. Robert had nothing to do with that. Robert actually offered to buy all that stuff from Nathan and Rudd, and they declined. And so they were the ones who decided to put it up for auction. Interestingly enough, Robert had about 60 items on his list, ranging from, there were hinges from a door that were missing. So there's a door between the butler's pantry and the kitchen. The door was still there, but the hinges were gone, and the hinges went to the sale. To scrapbooks of Kathy Banowitz's, that probably should have been part of the house, to portraits of the Squires, but they made the decision to sell all of that. So, and I don't know, has anybody participated in those kind of online bidding things?
No.
So have you? It's interesting, I did not know. So the auction went to 5 o'clock last Wednesday, Tuesday, I don't remember the day. And Robert and I had a meeting with somebody else, and he said, well, I can't go because the auction is closing and I've got a couple things. Well, what I did not know is at 4:59, if you go in and you bid on pick a thing, the scrapbooks of Kathy Banowitz, it extends the auction for that item 5 more minutes. So the auction was still going like at 9, 10 o'clock at night on some items, not all items, but people would go in, try to do a quick bid, and then it would just renew for 5 more minutes. So kind of went on forever. Okay, enough about the Squires. Louis Dunhill was listed in the 1920s as president of First National Bank. I don't have any information on Mr. Dunhill. Okay, so now we start, and this is going to be the quiz portion of the presentation to see how well you listened. So Lynn G. Fuller, I don't know the beginning date, but he was president until 1948. So this is Old Man Fuller. Who's next?
His son.
Roberta gets a prize. So Bill Fuller.
He's taking notes.
Oh, is that?
Boy, with friends like that, right?
So Bill Fuller was president then from 1948 to 1964. Who was next?
Louis Lane.
Oh, no, not Louis Lane, but that's a name from the past. Good for you. So 1964, they sold to Peter Bezanson, who was president? Jerry Maples. So Jerry Maples, Peter's son-in-law, right? Is that right, Roger? He was the
Yes,
son-in-law
that's right. You bet.
of Peter, was the first president of the Jackson State Savings Bank when Peter bought it. Who's next? These are all names that you know. No, not Louis Lane. Louis Lane would have been before that, but it's funny that you bring that name up, because when you think of Louis Lane, you think of all these names that you haven't heard of in a long time. Ott Reel, Reed Erickson, Don Henningsen, Dave Lutt, all these names that you're like, oh my goodness, I forgot about that. Okay, so I'll give this to you. Craig Bentrott. Yeah, oh, you should have gotten that. Craig Bentrott. So he was the last president of the Jackson State Bank and Trust Company as owned by the Fullers, and then the first Hawkeye Bank Corporation president. Now it gets hard. So unless you really followed what was going on, it gets a little harder. Any guesses? Okay, because this guy, you don't hear him very often. Tons Mathiasen. Oh, I jumped 2. So Tons Mathiasen was the president of Hawkeye. Then the next person was Gary Grote, and he was president of Hawkeye for a bit, and then Mercantile Bank of Maquoketa. Who's next? We're getting really close. Another tough one. Pat Hurley. So Pat Hurley was from 1999 to 2005. And the last one is easy. Easy. Dwayne Trentcamp. So he was named president in 2008 until he retired, 2016. Now it's interesting, there's a little gap between 2005 and 2008. It's believed during that time that the bank reported to a regional president, so there wasn't really a president of the Maquoketa Bank. But any stories of any of these folks? Some of you probably knew them or entertained them or worked with them. Anybody? Roger, you have any stories?
That was a sidebar, but I think Hans Matthiasson was a great racquetball player.
Yeah.
And I played racquetball with him and beat me every time. But we were beating them in the bank.
Yes. So was that him being better, or were you just being nice and letting him win?
What's that?
Was he actually better, or were you just being nice and letting him win?
I wasn't being nice.
Ah!
He wasn't being nice.
Okay. Yeah, racquetball can be a tough game. Okay, so lots of changes then going on. The building was remodeled in 1984, and I've got some pictures that I'll share. They'll just be up here, just some general pictures. It's interesting, at that point they had all cubicles. So there weren't offices for the individual loan officers, they were just cubicles. They came back in 1992, tore out the cubicles to the extent that you tear them out, you just move them, and actually built offices there. Now it also is interesting, I've got a picture and it's not dated unfortunately, but it shows the lobby with a drop ceiling. So instead of that beautiful 20-foot ceiling, they dropped it down, had 2 chandeliers in it, so just a different look for the time, I guess. Not just the walls changed, but the names changed. And so you almost have to have a scorecard, unfortunately, with banking in the day. So you see Hawkeye Bank Corporation was then purchased by Mercantile Bank of St. Louis. The bank was known as Mercantile Bank of Maquoketa. Then First Star was located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, purchased Mercantile Bank in the late 1990s. In 2002 then, First Star actually bought U.S. Bank. But they were becoming a national franchise. Well, nobody knew what a First Star was, right? What the heck is that? So they took the U.S. Bank name. And they were there, U.S. Bank was there until 2018, which is kind of sad because they only missed a couple years of being there, 100 years of almost continuous banking service, but it was closed in 2018. In 2021 then, Robert bought the space from U.S. Bank, and what Innovate 120 is it's meant to support entrepreneurial efforts in Jackson County. And it'll surprise you, first of all, it'll surprise you how many things are actually built in Jackson County. Some really interesting things and products that are built here. But it's also, tons of people have a side hustle. So, they have a job and then they go do this. Well, our whole idea is, whatever this is, can we give that a leg? Can we give it license? Is it something that could grow? The other thing is it's a co-working hub. So, a lot of people who are starting businesses, at some point, you need a professional office. You can't take Zoom calls in a closet with clothes hanging or the washing machine is running behind you. At some point in your professional development, you need a professional presence. And that's what Innovate 120 can also do during that point. So it's hybrid workers and those kind of things. What's really nice is we just had a system installed with Joe Sokol from Infinity. If you rent from us, we'll give you a code. The code allows you into the building. It takes a picture when you come in. There's video in the building, so it's very safe because it's a big building. It can be a little spooky at times. And then, if you have a day pass, it shuts off in a day. If If you have a month pass, it shuts off in a month. So it's a great resource. Talk a little bit about Robert. So I don't know if anybody remembers, Arlene worked at the bank. I actually worked with Arlene. Thelma, you probably worked with Arlene and Roger too. He is one of 4 siblings. He has 2 older sisters. So Rhonda and Kay. Rhonda was quite a bit older than Robert, 5 years or something. And then he has a younger brother named Wes. Interestingly enough, all graduates of Maquoketa High School, and then all graduates of UNI, which I think is odd. So they must have had some kind of package deal to work here. Let's talk real quickly about major programming today at Innovate. So we have a number of things that we're doing. The first, and I passed out some cards, are our Wednesdays Are Possible. It's a once-a-month discussion to celebrate entrepreneurism in Jackson County. And again, you would be surprised, the crazy stuff. I mean, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Time curling iron product. It's like a $10 million product today, developed in Bellevue by a woman in Bellevue. And it's interesting, when she spoke, she brought a curling iron that they called Frankentime, I think. And what they did is they'd taken all these curling irons and torn them apart and then just glued them or welded them, I don't know, put together for the prototype. But it's a super successful business in the county and employs a lot of people. Now all the industrial or all the manufacture is done elsewhere, but all the fulfillment is done here and the marketing is done here too. So it's the first Wednesday of every month. Our next one is November 1. We're actually in Preston, and we're talking with the folks, the Driscolls, who run the Preston Locker and the Preston Grocery. So it's just interesting to kind of hear, because I think sometimes we think, oh, we got an idea, and you know, everybody, an overnight success, you know, they always say is like 15 years, right? I mean, overnight success doesn't happen overnight. So it's great to hear stories of people struggling. You know, our first speaker was Mark Lyon, who came in and talked about his dream and what motivated him and what you guys put together and how, you know, your mission and how you wanted to follow and run the business. And so I would encourage you, first Wednesday of the month, it's always in the newspaper. In December, it is going to be Carrie Sheepers, who's a super good egg. If you know Carrie, Carrie's a world coming to, and I'll tell you, if you have an opportunity to see these young people in action, our future is pretty bright. You know, these kids, so we had 15 kids this year, 7 of them from Pleasant Valley, 3 from Easton Valley, 2 from Marquette Catholic, 2 from here. Please don't add that number up. I'm not sure it added up to 15. Just kids from all over the place. And the opportunities they get to collaborate and to think through a project. You know, they're thrown on a team with 2 other people, don't know them, they're from a different school, they have to figure out really quickly how to collaborate, you have to figure out, you know, you're good at this and you're good at that, move through the process, and the ideas they come up with are just amazing. So I'll give you a quick example. One of the companies we work with is GAF. Don't know if you're familiar with GAF, they're the largest roofing manufacturer in the world. So shingles and that. One of the things they said is, how can we use AI to improve the safety of roofers? So roofing, unbeknownst to me, is one of the most dangerous occupations in the country. And so their whole project was, how do you develop, using AI, and using all the technology that's available, how do you improve that? Well, these kids, 3 kids, came up with an idea that they would have a wearable, so like a smartwatch. I don't have a smartwatch because I'm not smart enough, but you know, a smartwatch, some kind of wearable device that a roofer would wear, and it would measure different biometrics from that person, but also surrounding things. So here's one of the things that happened, and when you think of this, you think, of course that would happen. you're a roofer, you're busy, you're going down the row, all of a sudden you don't realize you're below a power line. Because you're on a roof, right? So you're da-da-da, all of a sudden you stand up and you're electrocuted because you didn't know you were underneath the power line. One of the things the wearable does is it alerts you to, hey, there's a power line, and it also alerts your foreman. So both of you know, heads up, there's a power line here. The other thing it measures is if you're dehydrated or not. So many times accidents happen in the afternoon because they're tired. They don't put it on all the safety equipment in the afternoon. They just want to get back to work. Well, it measures, hey, you need to take a break. It's hot, because the heat up on a roof. So the stuff that they do is absolutely amazing. We did do summer science camps this year. Oh my dear Lord Jesus. So my wife and I have a daughter. She participated in summer camps and all that. Whew, has that changed? So we had 50 kids. They were delightful, but the whole process, I had no clue. I remember working with 3 teachers, and they said, well, what's your behavior policy? What do you mean, what's our behavior policy? If they act up, I'm calling your grandma, because I know her, and then you're going to be in big trouble. Well, you got to have 1 strike, 2 threes, so, but we'll do that again. We had 50 kids, super fun kids, all the way from 1st grade through 8th grade. It's held during the summer, and we'll do that again. And then the last thing we did is a high school startup boot camp. So think of Shark Tank. So the show where you go, but then this actually addresses all the stuff before the presentation. So it's all the work around identifying the market, identifying competitors, all that kind of stuff, and Robert works through that. The winner last year was a young man named Isaac Brinker. He's a senior this year at Marquette Catholic. His idea was to develop a technology from a drone that would listen to the unique sound signatures of invasive species that would affect soybean yield. Whew. I'm like, what? But so different. So the whole idea is then you don't spray the whole field. You spray this portion of the field because this is where the infestation is. And so it makes sense for the environment, but then it also makes sense for the producer because they can, really save a ton of money. Okay, so the last thing I want to share, fun story. I've got 2 safe deposit boxes up here. Now all of us, since we're older, remember what a safe deposit box is, right? You put all your valuables and your safety stuff in it, and remember you got a little thing like this, regardless of what bank you were in. There's keys in here. There was a key for the bank had a key, and you individually had a key. Both had to be used to turn it. So when the bank closed, there were about 1,500 boxes in the bank. And they had 90 days to close out those boxes. They had to notify every owner of the box on record by certified mail that, hey, the bank's closing, come in, get your stuff. Boxes ended up in 3 different categories. First was, and the largest, found the owner, they had the key, make an appointment, come in, get your stuff. In a nice way, right? I mean, that doesn't sound nice, but I'm sure it was nice. The second was, they found the owner, but like me, they lost the key. Oh, I don't know where the freaking key is, So, to drill a box open, it's like $250. The bank covered all those costs. So, made an appointment, Diebold was the company, we came in, drilled the box. The third category, and the most interesting category, was couldn't find the owner. Now, it's a little different, so, and I'll just use a name that everybody knows. So if Bob and Ann Osterhaus have a box, but if Matt and Marilyn aren't listed on the box, they can't contact Matt and Marilyn. They can only contact the owner of the box. And so what happens, there were about 25 boxes that they couldn't find anybody, no idea who it was. So the bank has to have both of those or all those drilled open. They take an inventory with 2 bank employees there. Everything is put in a tamper-resistant envelope. Everything is inventoried, even a paperclip is inventoried. It then is sent to Minneapolis because that's where US Bank is headquartered. They have a lockbox closing department. And after a year, it is then sent to the state, and it becomes part of the Great Iowa Treasure Hunt. Now here's the important thing. So, of the boxes that no one claimed, one of them, just like this, one of the large boxes when they opened it, was filled with silver coins. Okay, that's somebody's grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle. So I would encourage you to go out to the state, just look Great Treasure Hunt Iowa, you get the website, you type in a name, and you can find out if somebody that's related to you could have had that box. Now, interestingly enough, what happens, they keep everything in the box at the state for 5 years. After 5 years, they monetize anything that can be. So anything that's worth any money, they sell. And they throw everything else away, unfortunately. Which I asked the person, well, do you not talk to the Iowa Historical? Because there could be stuff in there. Well, no, gotta go. The other interesting box was a box this size. And in that box, again, this is unclaimed, couldn't find the owner, couldn't find anybody, was a loaded pistol.
Oh.
Now, when you think of today, with all the crazy gun stuff going on, that doesn't sound as odd. But when you think somebody snuck a loaded pistol somewhere on the person in the box, I don't know, in a box, went to the privacy room, put it in the box, and then went in and locked it away. Now, Marilyn Willie is convinced that it's a murder weapon. Someone has hidden in it, but it's an interesting story, and I don't think anybody will probably claim that. I did ask the bank, can you just give me the names, because I'll bet money that people know. If I just listed the 25 names, someone would say, oh, that's my aunt. Well, of course, for confidentiality reasons, they cannot, which makes total sense. So, but I would encourage you to go out, take a look at the Iowa Great Treasure Hunt, see if you've got some cash. It's almost at the 5 years where they will monetize, and I don't know if it's the 5 years from when the bank or with the 5 years when they actually received it, but it's getting close, and I would encourage you to go out and take a look at it. Anything you want to add? Any questions? That's all for my, presentation today. I appreciate you being so attentive, and it was interesting to talk again about a bank that I never worked in. But anything anybody else would like to add? Any memories you have of the bank that you'd like to share?
No, there's some of the older ladies that we work with, of course, have been dead for years, like Marguerite
Sokol.
Yep. I remember Louis Lean really well. Yeah. At the Christmas parties, whoever the young girl was that sat by Louis, he always hitched her leg. Just being friendly.
Yes, just being friendly.
That was the story that went around.
Oh my Lord, is that funny? Well, it's funny because Mary Kay, you must have worked in the same department Mary Kay did, because she remembers going to work for Marguerite Sokol. Her memories are that she was a very sharp dresser, but no nonsense. We're going to get the stuff done and da-da-da-da-da. So, anything else? Oh, yeah, Roger. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll come back to it. Roger, go ahead.
I just things that I remember is that Louis Lean and Johnny Jargo were the people I remember very vividly. They're both short of stature, but they were like up here when we went in. And their office was in one area, and they almost were back to back in this little area on the floor. And you went through a kind of a little folding, a little gate to get to the area. And they were the bank. They were the bank. The other thing that I would remember is the tellers were behind cages. I mean, they were behind.
Oh, sure.
So the clients didn't really have access to them.
Just one quick thing, then we'll go to Ralph. Just so the bank, when it was built, was all white Alabama marble.
But the actual teller stations and the customer stations had green marble, and we actually have some of that green marble at the bank. So interestingly enough, it was in Bob Stockham's warehouse basement. So it must have been Punch or somebody who had ripped that out. It was just all stacked up in the basement, and we went and we made some tables out. Ralph, what were you going to share?
Lynn Fuller was in my high school class.
Oh!
And when we were doing fundraising for the Y, I went up to the bank in Dubuque and said, hey, Lynn, can you contribute? And sure enough, I think he did.
And that would be Bill?
That'd be Bill's son.
Okay. See, I was nice to you. I didn't guess old name. Interesting. Yeah, fine.
So Louis Lane wrote a really neat little book. I can't remember the name of it. It's got a gold cover with all kinds of stories about Jackson State Bank and different experiences and people that lived, that worked there. And it's
That'd
really
be interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look that up.
I'm upstairs.
What were you going to share? Or you just,
Oh, no,
okay?
I had one other little thing I just remembered.
Oh.
My dad's cousin, Milt Sagers, worked at the bank.
Oh,
He was a loan officer or something. And there were 5 of us kids. We lived in the country. Didn't have much money. And Dad would go in every fall and borrow $250 through Milt and to get us through the winter. $250.
wow.
Got us through the
Wow,
winter.
wow, wow. How about,
I'm a latecomer to Macoka, I came in '85, but Pat Hurley, if anybody remembers him, he and his wife moved to Fairfield, my hometown, after when they left. And they're now in Kansas City. That's where their daughter lives and their grandkids. And they had the 3 boys too, and the one boy, I can't remember which one, died of brain cancer. But they all, at one time, all 3 of their sons worked for out in Silicon Valley for the different companies out there.
Wow.
They were smart.
now when Pat went to Fairfield, was he involved in a bank there?
First name,
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, oh, yeah, fine.
One more question. So for all the grandparents here, and there are many, so how do all of our really young grandchildren find their way into these programs that
Yeah.
you're doing?
Great question. So Bonnie was asking about how do we get our grandkids involved in the program. So what I'll do is I'll make sure when we roll those out, I'll provide you information. Because it's interesting, grandparents are one of the greatest recruiters, right? Because when grandma or grandpa says, this is a smart idea for you, you do it. So I thank you for asking that, but I'll make sure. And for the UX design internship, those we usually start in February, March, but we also need grandparents' help because we make a ton of presentations to schools and parents and teachers, and they, oh, that's a really good idea. Well, they need a little push once in a while, so I appreciate that. Anything else? Oh, Roger, yeah.
I assume that the story about the gun, if the owner of the lockbox, if he wanted to rob the bank, he would simply go in, lockbox, put the gun, rob the bank.
I would agree. Except Maryland thinks it's where they hit a murder weapon.
Yes.
Okay.
So, okay, well, thank you very much.